Well, hey, so welcome to week 6. Thank you so much for listening to my story last week. I don't know how that affects you exactly, but I do know that when I overhear other people's stories, especially of brokenness, it's not like I'm going to look for a train wreck or anything, but I must admit, when you're real with me, when you tell me the things that have shaped you or hurt you, I gotta admit, it does help me. And it helps me because I know that everyone isn't their Facebook and their Instagram posts, and so to see that other side of you is, I think, important. So I just want to say thanks for listening to my story, and even though I really wish I could have been a fly on the wall in your VF groups last week, to know that you're sharing those psalms that you made, and I did get to read the ones that you created for your community, and some of you bled some of your own stuff into there, and that's just totally fine. But it's good, and I think it brings those psalms alive. You get to see that those Bible people are real people facing real problems, and we put our things into that context, and I think it really does bring the scriptures alive. I mean, the same God that is serving them in their weakness and their yearnings and their pains is the same God that we serve today, and I think that exercise brings it out. Now, for those of you who had difficulty last week going through that rest exercise for 4 hours, just know that this is it's a countercultural thing. It is, there's a level of being able to just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to let some things go in order to be with the Lord. And that's just real important. I don't know if you've noticed with my video making, not everything's perfect. It can't be. And I have to be comfortable with that. And I need you to be comfortable with that because it's just life. And I can't be all things to all people at all times because I am not a polished person, and most of you are not either. And so something's going to have to give. And what we can't let give is our relationship with the Lord. And so, take that for what it's worth. Now, I have been completely happy, impressed with your development of your answer to your CIQ. I've been looking at some of those, your answers to the crafting a rule of life, and then your metaphors. And these are things should be starting to congeal for you. And in the next couple of weeks, you're going to have a one-on-one guidance meeting with your VF group leader. And I would like to encourage you that now that you have your metaphor and your CIQ answer, things are starting to, again, congeal for you. Look back at that Strengths Finder, because just because you have a metaphor doesn't mean, let's just say you come up with the same metaphor as Francis Chan. It's quite possible that your ministry will look quite differently than Francis Chan's or whoever it is you pick, some famous person. But certainly mine does. Some people just have the capability to be on camera and be with people or whatever it is that they do. And a lot of it's just where Yahweh puts you. And I think all of us just need to be comfortable with who we are, and that's a big deal. Now, this week is on the temple. And the Machia text is going to cover you know that you are Yahweh's temple. God's Spirit lives in you, and He's going to take it from and this is very common to look at that from the vantage point of self-care, which I do think is very important. But I think there's another aspect to it that I would like to emphasize, and that is that you are Yahweh's temple, and that God's Spirit lives in you. And so here we have the Apostle Paul. He's in Corinth, and he goes over to Ephesus, and best we can tell, it's 62 AD-ish. The Apostle Paul is in prison, and he's reflecting on his brothers and sisters, the Ephesians, and that church, and he is going to die a martyr's death. Oh my gosh, Paul is so inspiring to me. I just think about him, my heart just like, oh, I so get you. But anyway, he's writing the Ephesians, and he makes a turn in Ephesians chapter 4, and he alludes to the tabernacle or temple, and then he says, hey, you are all one body. So in Corinthians, he talks about, you're this body made up of many parts, but in Ephesians, you have apostles, prophets, pastors, teachers, evangelists, and you all come together to support and love one another. And you might not have heard these words. Some of you have or haven't, but there are three words I just want to introduce you to, and that would be orthocardia, orthopraxy, and orthodoxy. So orthocardia is right heart, orthopraxy, right doing, and then orthodoxy, right thinking. And then you have this kind of, Jesus says there's going to come a day where you're going to worship in spirit and in truth. Now, why I think that that phrasing is multifaceted. I could just kind of give you one take. And that is what I think is happening with the Abrahamic covenant is this heart first kind of issue. It is orthocardia, circumcised heart. But I want you to notice that Yahweh's primary modality for teaching us isn't actually downloading doctrine to us. What God does is He gives us to-dos. And He says, do this sort of thing. And out of that emerges right thinking. In other words, I think what's happening at Sinai is that Yahweh's actually giving them the orthopraxy. Here's how to right do. And as you right do that with the right heart, which, by the way, is new covenant language. We're going to right do, but God's going to put His Spirit in us that we might walk in those ways, right? And then out of that comes the right think. A lot of people think the right think comes first. I don't think it works that way. And here's why I don't. This is not my goal right now to get all smart with you, but in communication theory, basically it says that, you have the inability to process like this verbal language that I'm like, here it's going into the camera, it's going into your ears, and you process my language based on your experience of language, your experiences as a person. In other words, your cognitive environment or your environment shapes the very symbols that I'm giving to you right now. So here's the deal. It is actually impossible to think or to theologize apart from practices. And that's why Yahweh gives us these practices. Hey, it's like God saying, press into this story, do these things so that as you think about me, you think rightly about me. And so the Apostle Paul, he wants this orthocardia. He wants this orthopraxy. He wants what happened with Abraham, being willing to sacrifice his son. And even though the Israelites messed up, what Yahweh wanted, just because they didn't have the circumcised heart, the spirit that God was going to give them, making their heart of stone into a heart of flesh. But He's giving them this practice that if this heart could be married with this practice, and then what's happening in that tabernacle system, these are all things that guide people to know the different facets of Jesus and His ministry, what Yahweh's looking to do in both salvation and sanctification. And so when we have right heart with obedience, what emerges out of that is right thinking. We think soberly about God. And so what's this have to do with the temple? Well, that's what the temple is all about. The temple is about creating an environment by which a right heart could think about God and then move on in righteousness. We are first the people of God. We are a people of character, ones that are, and it's not just character like, a lot of people can have good character, but it's a particular type of character. It's a character that is rooted in the salvation of Jesus, the gospel of the kingdom, and it's also rooted in the sanctification narrative. And as we do that, we recognize our weaknesses and we begin to walk in righteousness and do right things, okay? That's important. And so you are God's temple. We get that character thing down. We know who we are. We think sober-minded about ourselves. We obey. The Spirit does the rest, and then we go on to walk in spirit and in truth. There's actually more to that story, but I'm going to leave it there for now. And I want to encourage you that you are God's temple. God's Spirit lives in you. And then we serve each other, and I'm just so happy to be with you this week. I'll see you over in the guidance video.